Welcome back to Apatros Review. In this episode we do the film Night Hunter, starring Don the Dragon Wilson as a vampire hunter. Hi there. Welcome back to Apatros Review. I'm your host, Mila Sipka, and I'm going to take you on a little ride through science fiction, action, horror, and the occasional comedy and video games and whatever, all in my personal collection. Now in this episode we look at a film called Night Hunter, which was released in 1995 and was the first of the 1990s vampire action films. You remember the Blade trilogy and John Carpenter's Vampires? Well, this one did it first, and only like a couple years before. Now, the DVD of this, as I'll explain later, comes from a bargain basement label called RAAM Multimedia, which is a subsidiary of Payless Entertainment. I'll explain that in a moment. Now, remember those vampire actions made during the late 1990s, such as John Carpenter's Vampires and the Blade trilogy? Well, with the exception of the vampire swashbuckler Captain Chrono's Vampire Hunter that Hammer made in their good old days, this genre started with the likes of Night Hunter, a cheap B action horror film made between Concord New Horizons and a company formed by Indian tennis player turned film producer Ashok Amitraj before they did Royal Oaks. Directing this is Rick Jacobson, who had made a string of B-grade action films and the occasional sci-fi film, such as the surprisingly good synthetic Suspect Device, which I'll cover in the future. And this one stars 1990s champion kickboxer Don the Dragon Wilson in another of his standard hero roles. Now for the story, Jack Cutter is the last of a long line of vampire hunters. Working alone and shunning contact with the outside world, Cutter is close to wiping out the race of vampires who are capable of walking in daylight, are super fast and strong, and can only be killed by having the necks or backs snapped. After assassinating a clan of vampires in a restaurant, Cutter finds himself a wanted fugitive by the FBI. Forcing to team up with a female tabloid reporter, Cutter's quest to wipe out all vampires hits its climax as the last of the remaining vampires make plans to reproduce their numbers by feeding on the upcoming eclipse, which is the only time vampires can be bred. Now, Night Hunter is an interesting film in the way that it treats vampire lore, mainly by removing most of the classic mythology that the creatures have generated over the centuries, all in a ploy to move the story along at the pace of a standard action B-grader. Now, most fans of vampire films tend to kick this one a bit, and this film has got something of a bad reputation as a crap film. I don't exactly agree with that. In this regard, William C. Martell's economically structured script moves pretty briskly and sets up an interesting alternate take on the Bloodsuckers. But the central problem, this is the only problem I had with the film, is that its story is too economically structured to make the central concept work fully. There is not much of a drive to the story, excepting the deus ex machina of the eclipse that the vampires need to reproduce their numbers with, and the action scenes, particularly the hand-to-hand combat between Wilson and the vampires, who, like I said, can only be killed by neck snaps, are shot in what I can only term as earthquake cam, an extreme form of shaky cam where the camera just moves up and down like the cameraman's on having seizures or something. Although to be fair, this ridiculous stylistic trick is actually surprisingly easier to take on the eyes than most of that regular shaky cam bullshit that most action films these days have. Also, add to that the incomprehensible rapid-fire editing that some of these films have. For example, Resident Evil: The Final Chapter, which could have been a reasonable film if it wasn't for the bloody shaky cam and the irritatingly fast editing. Anyway, add to that the habit that Martel has of naming its characters after genre film directors, something that's been pretty prevalent in some writing circles, and William C. Martel actually uses this as one of his idiosyncrasies. Like in most of his films, he names the characters after horror film directors. For example, Droid Gunner. I'll review that in the future. But anyway, despite the bad stylistic choices, Night Hunter is pretty much an average action horror hybrid that tries but botches what could have been a decent idea for a B-film franchise. Still, it's not terrible. Like I said, it's not as bad as what some people make it out to be. I mean, it's average, at best. I mean, if you're a vampire fan, this might be a bit of a ridiculous one, but, to tell you the truth, it's better than Twilight. And if you want a decent time waster for vampire fans, this might do the trick. So I give this film a C, which is a 4 out of 10, or 2 out of 5 stars, which means it's average. Not bad, but not good either. As for the DVD, this was one of a large number of extremely cheap bargain basement DVDs put out by RAAM Multimedia, which was a subsidiary of Payless Entertainment that only lasted for like a single year in the year 2010, and issued at least more than 100 titles onto those $1 or $2 RRP discs and supplied to bargain basement stores and cheap DVD resellers. For a time in the early 2010s, these discs could be found at practically every $2 shop, or as Americans say, 5 and dime, and were sold until their stocks were exhausted. In some cases, only $1. Maximum price was $2. I've bought a fair number of these and have personally compressed some of them into some of my homemade discs to keep my shelf space preserved. But my favorite of this particular catalog is the 1990s Colt Synthetic Automatic, which will probably be the last of these RAAM Multimedia discs I'll ever review. Anyway, RAAM Multimedia specialized in El Cheapo discs that looked a lot better and polished and painless as a normal catalog, with many designs that matched the disc label and sleeve design, but always with two options: play movie and chapter selection. Also, having said that, all of these discs have two unusual features. First, when you play the disc, you can skip forward the chapter, but you can't skip back, forcing you to have to backtrack by standard rewind. Second, the first chapter of the movie is never able to be selected from the chapter submenu, and actually down-labeled the chapters. So instead, on the chapter submenu, what says chapter 1 is actually chapter 2. Probably because otherwise the play movie option will be redundant. So at least that's what according to the text who put these discs together. Now all of these discs had 9 chapters. So like I said, they'll be downmarked to avoid telling the viewer that the chapter 1 on the menu is actually chapter 2, and the real chapter was not selectable from that submenu unless they use the play movie option in the main menu. Having said that, some players might be able to skip back a chapter, but I cannot confirm this at the time. Picture and sound quality of this film resembles that of a very good quality VHS, or one that has been remastered for the minimum standards of the label. And for Night Hunter, the quality is pretty dang good. In fact, it's a 4:3 frame, which is the original aspect ratio because this is a direct-to-video title, and the sound quality is a pretty decent stereo mix that clocks in at 384 kilobytes, which is pretty much more punchy bitrate than usual stereo mix to me Tier 1 releases. You can practically print this on VHS and it will look like a brand new VHS tape transfer. Otherwise, this disc is a near reference quality for such a cheap disc for this type of market. That said, the picture quality has a little shadow detail, but at least the remastering used makes this look good enough for the $2 price tag. There are no subtitles or extras to this disc, which, if included, would push up the price tag, so no effort was made to add anything extra. But for personally, I think if you include the film's trailer, you can dig one up without cause any reason to increase the price of these things, and also add to the keepsake factor. Anyway, this disc is extremely cheap, but if you're a fan of the film, this would be a far better choice than import US disc for the simple reason it's so cheap, and the only difference between Region 1 and Region 4 disc will be the trailer for the R1 disc. But that's about it, really. As for the print, I give a B+, which is a 3.5 stars out of 5, or 7 out of 10, which means remarkably good. Supplement, D-, which 1 out of 10, which means because there's no extras on this disc. Anyway, that's it for this review.